Welcome to Surrey-White Rock. My name is Gordie Hogg, and I'm delighted to have you all here. I want to start by recognizing that and acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional, or gathering on the traditional territory where we live, work, and play of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, and Kwantlen, as well as the Coast Salish people. And we're honored to have you here. I'm delighted that we have the leader back in South Surrey-White Rock yet again. As many of you may know, I have lived in this community all of my life. My father was the first physician here, and he was instrumental in bringing a hospital to this area. And I've served in 3 levels of government. I started as a youth probation officer. I used to ride with the RCMP on the weekends, going to family violence and youth gang issues. I was a youth probation officer. And my wife and I became foster parents because we recognized that there were some people that didn't have the same advantages that we had. And then I realized that actually governments could make a difference. So I ran for council in White Rock and did that for 20 years and was mayor for 10. And then I was an MLA for 20 years and had a number of different cabinet posts, and again trying to look at what are the advantages that we can help and serve others with. When I decided to run in 2017, I knew that this team was the right one to run for, recognizing equity, looking at inclusion, and tackling some of the big challenges that our generation faces. Yesterday, we saw that the Liberal plan, A Home for Everyone, came forward to help Canadians, and especially looking at younger people and their ability to enter into the housing market, which is so challenged in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. So I'm delighted that we've been able to make those changes, and that we have a leader who has recognized that practices, policies, and legislation that reflect those values of inclusivity are so important. So it is my privilege to introduce to you Justin Trudeau. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. It is such a treat to be back in BC for a second week in a row. As you know, this province has been a second home to me for so long. I'm happy to be here to share our plan to keep moving forward for British Columbians and for everyone. It's great to be joined today by Gordie Hogg, someone who never stops standing up for his community. Look no further than Gordie's many, many years of experience as Mayor of White Rock, as MLA, and of course, as an MP on our Liberal team. Gordie, I can't wait to have your voice and your leadership back with us in Ottawa as our next Liberal MP for South Surrey-White Rock. My friends, when this pandemic hit, no one knew what to expect. But as Canadians, well, you knew what to do. You put on a mask, kept your distance, and got your vaccine. In other words, you did your part. Et si vous n'avez pas encore reçu votre vaccin, c'est le temps d'y aller. Parlez-en dans votre entourage à ceux qui ne l'ont pas encore reçu. C'est important si on veut en finir avec la pandémie une bonne fois pour toutes. En tant que gouvernement, on sait que la seule façon d'avancer, c'est de rester fidèle à nos valeurs. Depuis 2015, on se tient debout pour la classe moyenne et pour les gens qui travaillent fort pour s'y joindre. On a augmenté les impôts pour les 1% les plus riches, afin de pouvoir les baisser pour la classe moyenne. Avec l'allocation canadienne pour enfants, on a sorti des centaines de milliers d'enfants de la pauvreté, et pendant la crise, on ne vous a pas laissé tomber. Que ce soit avec la PCU, les vaccins ou le logement abordable, on a été là pour vous. Et on va continuer d'avancer en s'assurant que personne ne soit laissé pour compte. Earlier this morning, I met with Pam and Mike here in Surrey and their 3 kids. We talked about something I hear a lot from folks across BC and around the country, the price of a new home. Like any parent, they want what's best for their children. But with the housing market the way it is, Pam and Mike are worried their kids won't ever be able to buy a home, and more specifically, a home in the community in which they grew up. And they're not alone. For far too many people, owning a place just isn't within reach. And my friends, we have a plan to change that. To begin with, we'll help you buy your first home sooner. And we'll do this by getting you to a down payment faster with a plan worth tens of thousands of dollars. We'll also launch a new rent-to-own program. At the same time, we'll crack down on predatory speculators competing with families trying to buy their first home. That means no more foreign wealth being parked in homes that people should be living in. We'll also make the process of buying a home more transparent, so no more blind bidding. And to top it off, we'll work with municipalities to get more homes built and renovated. Unlike other parties, we have a plan on housing that will actually help you. And today, I want to tell you about one of the ways we're going to make that a reality. This pandemic has been really hard on so many Canadians, on so many small businesses. But the truth of it is that for some businesses, it's been really good. Look no further than the financial institutions. Big banks and insurance companies have been doing very well over these past many months. This week, Canada's biggest banks are posting their latest massive profits of billions of dollars. Of course, one of the reasons banks have been doing so well is that the economy is doing well. And the economy is doing well because we invested in Canadians. We invested in small businesses. And above all, we invested in you. And for your part, you worked really hard. You tightened your belt. And because you did that, because you sacrificed, because you saved, big banks got a windfall. So as we rebuild, we're going to ask big financial institutions to pay a little back, to pay a little more, so that we can do more for you. And in particular, so that we can help you own your home, and so own your future. We will raise the corporate income tax rate for Canada's largest and most profitable banks and insurance companies by 3 percentage points on all earnings over $1 billion. We'll also establish the Canada Recovery Dividend, so these institutions contribute more over the next 4 years of Canada's recovery. Si vous travaillez fort, si vous épargnez de l'argent, votre rêve d'avoir votre propre maison devrait être possible. Vous ne devriez pas avoir à vous éloigner de votre lieu de travail, de votre école ou de votre famille pour être capable de payer votre loyer. Vous ne devriez pas avoir à subir la surenchère causée par la spéculation. C'est temps que ça change. On va vous aider à devenir propriétaire plus tôt. On va s'attaquer aux requins de l'immobilier. On va combattre la spéculation. On va mettre un frein aux fortunes étrangères qui viennent acheter des maisons ici sans les habiter. Et on va travailler avec les municipalités pour construire et rénover encore plus de logements. Contrairement au Parti conservateur, on sera là pour vous. My friends, we're focused on you and your family. And frankly, not everyone else is. The first thing we did when we formed government was to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class. The NDP voted against that. And the Conservative Party, well, they have the same plan they always have, giving the biggest breaks to the wealthiest few. And not just on housing. Erin O'Toole wants to rip up our plan on $10 a day childcare right along with our commitment on vaccines. If Erin O'Toole wants to be the leader of this country, I have to say it's not a good sign that he can't even convince his own candidates to get vaccinated. Thankfully, here in BC, you know that getting vaccinated is what's going to get us through this pandemic. I'm happy to see Premier Horgan leading on this. And I'm happy that organizations like UBC and the Canucks are doing their part and supporting the Premier's measures. My friends, you get it. Why doesn't Erin O'Toole? Now is not the time for a Conservative government that would take Canada back. Now is the time to move forward. And that's what's at stake. Leadership is about making choices. Over the past 17 months, Canadians chose to have each other's backs, to be there for each other, to listen to science and public health, to keep everyone safe. In the face of a crisis, we stayed true to our values. And at this critical moment in Canada's history, We need to keep making the right choices and beat this pandemic for good, while building a brighter future for everyone. Unlike the Conservative Party, I don't believe in trickle-down economics where you help the wealthy few and hope it works out for everyone else. That's never worked before, so why would it now? If there's anything these past months have shown, it's that when we choose to believe in you, in Canadians, our economy does well, our recovery is stronger, and everyone benefits. So let's keep going. Let's keep moving forward. My friends, I'm energized about what we can accomplish together. Housing for everyone, $10 a day childcare, stronger middle class with good jobs, and a clean environment. That's what we can achieve together. So get your vaccine if you haven't already. And together, let's rebuild an even stronger Canada for everyone. Que vous soyez à Montréal, à Toronto, à Vancouver, à Ottawa ou partout ailleurs au Canada, on va être là pour vous aider à acheter votre première maison. On va être là pour créer des places sans garderie. On va finir notre lutte contre la COVID-19 et on va rebâtir ensemble. Whether you mail in your ballot or head to the polls in person, make your voice heard. Have your say. You can go to liberal.ca/mail to find out how you can vote now. And together, let's move forward for everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Leader. We'll start the 20-minute question period with Jordan Press from the Canadian Press.
Good morning, Prime Minister, or good afternoon, wherever we are. I want to ask you about today's announcement. You're talking about taxing banks. A number of pension plans are invested in banks and insurance companies, and you're talking about taking money away from them and potentially taking those profits away from Canadians and retirees who rely on them. What do you have to say to those retirees who are banking on those profits?
During this pandemic, Canadians all tightened their belts. Canadians made tremendous sacrifices, and that includes many, many small businesses who had a really tough go of it, but who held on and made it through and are looking forward for a strong recovery. That wasn't the case for everyone. Our financial institutions and our biggest banks did very well during this pandemic, partially because Canadians pulled together, did the right things, and got the support they needed from their governments to get through. So, given that our banks have posted extraordinary large profits, have continued to be incredibly successful, including through a pandemic where everyone else had to tighten their belts, we're going to ask them to do a little bit more. Our banks will continue to be strong and profitable, but we will ensure that they're also doing their part so we can support Canadians who sacrificed so much during this pandemic and build back stronger for everyone. Okay. Cette pandémie a été extrêmement difficile pour bien du monde. Pour des familles qui ont fait énormément de sacrifices, pour des petites entreprises qui en ont arraché énormément pendant cette pandémie. Les gens ont fait des sacrifices, les gens ont dû jongler énormément de responsabilités pour pouvoir tenir bon à travers la pandémie. Mais ce n'était pas le cas pour tout le monde, que tout le monde a eu ça vraiment difficile. Les banques ont réussi très bien pendant cette pandémie parce que l'économie a su être protégée par ce que les gens ont fait, par ce que le gouvernement a fait. Alors, oui, on sait que les banques vont continuer d'être profitables et c'est important pour notre économie, mais on sait aussi qu'on devrait leur en demander un peu plus pour nous aider à rebâtir en mieux, pour s'assurer que tout le monde fait sa part. Pendant que les individus et les petites entreprises font des sacrifices, les banques devraient faire partie de la solution aussi.
Following up.
And Prime Minister, yesterday as part of the housing announcement, you promised, again, an urban Indigenous housing strategy. You promised this in 2019 as the missing piece in the National Housing Strategy. You had a chance to do it in your April budget. Why did you not?
We have been working consistently with Indigenous partners, with urban Indigenous leaders, and indeed with Indigenous leaders across the country on responding to their needs and their concerns. We know that reconciliation doesn't happen with policies dictated from Ottawa. Things need to be co-developed in partnership and empowering Indigenous communities and leaders themselves, and that is more difficult because of the nature of urban Indigenous populations, but it's also more important to do it right with urban Indigenous populations, which is why it is taking longer, but it takes longer to get something right. We will be there to partner, to invest in urban Indigenous housing and ensure that we're moving forward for everyone.
Next question.
Mr. Trudeau, good morning. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News. The United Kingdom says it has hours to get people out of Kabul and end its flights. A source has told CBC Canada has 24 to 48 hours. How many flights are left, and when is the last day Canada is allowed on the tarmac?
I know the ministers had a press conference earlier today to share a lot of details around this, but the bottom line for Canadians is this. We are going to continue to do absolutely everything we can to get as many people out of Afghanistan in the coming days as we possibly can. But once this evacuation phase is done, we're not stopping our work. We're going to continue with the international community to put pressure on the Taliban to ensure that people can leave the country. We will continue to work with neighbors and partners in the region to get more and more people to safety. We've committed to welcoming over 20,000 Afghan refugees to Canada, and we will work very closely on an ongoing fashion to do that. Yes, in the coming days, this phase will end, but there's a lot more work to do that we will continue to do to keep helping the Afghan people. Les ministres impliqués ont pu faire des annonces et répondre à des questions spécifiques ce matin, mais l'important pour les Canadiens, c'est ceci. Nous allons continuer de faire tout ce qu'on peut faire pour amener les Afghans vers la sécurité, vers la santé au Canada. Nous allons évidemment faire tout dans les prochains jours qu'on pourra, mais ça ne s'arrêtera pas là. On va continuer d'être impliqués dans la région avec les partenaires pour les semaines et les mois à venir en mettant de la pression avec la communauté internationale sur les talibans pour laisser les gens quitter le pays s'ils le veulent. Et nous allons être là pour accueillir des dizaines de milliers d'Afghans au Canada dans les mois à venir.
Following up.
Yesterday, you talked about the Taliban's needs to get recognition. You mentioned food security, a way to rebuild society and stability. How is that different than saying you'll negotiate with the Taliban government?
First of all, let's be very clear. The Taliban are a recognized terrorist entity under Canadian law, and we have no plans to recognize them. We are, however, working closely with the international community to ensure that we are putting pressure on them to let people flee to safety if they want to leave Afghanistan. And we will continue to work with the international community on exactly that. Okay. Laissez-moi être très très clair. Les talibans sont une entité terroriste reconnue sous la loi canadienne. Nous n'avons aucun plan de les reconnaître. Mais nous allons travailler avec la communauté internationale pour mettre de la pression sur les talibans pour permettre aux gens de fuir vers la sécurité.
Prochaine question.
Hello, Christy Kirkup with the Globe and Mail. Videos are now circulating of Afghans outside the airport in Afghanistan who are displaying Canadian exit documents, and they are apparently being told to wear red to try and signal to Canadian soldiers that they need help. Why are they being denied help?
I know that Minister Sajjan addressed this morning in the press conference with more details on the situation in Afghanistan. But what Canadians need to know and will know is that we are there doing everything we can to help get as many people out as possible. We will continue to work with partners on the ground. We will continue to work with our allies. We will continue to make sure we're getting everyone out that we can in the coming days and continue to engage into the coming months as we help get Afghans to safety in Canada.
Following up.
And just on another matter, why is a federal crown corporation going to be sailing a new passenger ferry made by a Chinese state-owned shipbuilder when the Canadian shipbuilding industry says that it could have built the vessel and Canadians remain detained in China? Are you going to cancel this contract?
We are concerned with this situation. When the Harper Conservatives launched the National Shipbuilding Strategy, they didn't make any provisions for Crown corporations to be part of that National Shipbuilding Strategy, and that's something we're going to look at. We've made many improvements over the years to strengthen the national shipbuilding strategy, including with the addition of a third yard. But we will continue to make sure that our procurement in this country aligns with our values.
Next question.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. Je vais vous demander si vous êtes à l'aise avec les propos de votre ministre, Maryam Monsef, ce matin, qui a référé aux talibans comme nos frères.
Comme j'ai été très clair depuis les débuts, les talibans, c'est des terroristes. Nous n'avons pas l'intention de les reconnaître. Nous allons continuer de travailler pour sauver le plus grand nombre de personnes possibles de l'Afghanistan dans les jours à venir, mais aussi dans les mois à venir. Okay. We have been very, very clear that Taliban are terrorists, and we have no plans to recognize them. We will continue to work with the international community to get as many Afghans to safety, not just in the coming days with the current operation, but into the coming months as we look to welcome more and more Afghans into Canada.
Allez-vous lui demander de retirer ses propos?
The minister addressed her comment. La ministre a expliqué ses commentaires. J'ai rien à ajouter. Nous allons continuer d'être très fermes sur les talibans en tant que terroristes et continuer de les pousser pour laisser les gens sortir de l'Afghanistan.
In English on the minister, please.
Okay. The minister has expressed her views and explained herself. We will continue to recognize that the Taliban represent a terrorist organization and continue to push on them so people can get out to safety.
Next question.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Since the election has been called, there have been no in-person pandemic briefings from public health. We've asked them for an update. Are you concerned that during a fourth wave, not having these regular in-person briefings could put Canadian lives at risk?
We know how important it is to end this pandemic once and for all. That's why every day I'm using the opportunity to speak to Canadians to remind them to get vaccinated. That is how we get through it. And if you haven't gotten vaccinated, please do. And if you have gotten vaccinated, speak to your friends who haven't yet got vaccinated to make sure that they decide to get vaccinated too. That's how we get through this. At the same time, we've seen public health officials across this country in various provinces are taking further measures to minimize the impacts of this wave of the unvaccinated we're seeing right now. But the bottom line is the way to get through this is to make sure everyone gets vaccinated. That starts for me, of course, with all of our Liberal candidates. It's a shame that Mr. O'Toole, who wants to become leader of this country, can't even convince his own candidates to get vaccinated.
Following up.
Are you suggesting that your comments along the campaign trail about vaccination are equivalent to briefings coming from Dr. Tam and Dr. New? And as well, have you or anyone in the Prime Minister's office directed FACT to hold off on these briefings during the election?
During a democratic event like an election, our government and our officials continue to work every single day to keep Canadians safe. Public Health Canada continues its excellent work, and partners across the provinces are doing things to make sure the Canadians stay safe, and will continue to.
Next question.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. Trudeau, as you continue to travel across the country seeking votes, at what point do you think that's not appropriate with the situation getting worse and worse in Afghanistan? Would you consider suspending your campaign even for a few days, go back to Ottawa to deal with?
Every single day I'm getting briefings on Afghanistan, and our ministers are working very, very closely to ensure that Canadians and Canada is doing absolutely everything we can to help the people of Afghanistan. I was pleased to be able to be on a G7 video conference call yesterday with our fellow leaders to talk about the situation in Afghanistan and how we can continue to work together to save as many people as possible. Yes, in the coming days, but also into the coming months as we continue our efforts to build a better future for the Afghan people.
Following up.
Just to follow on my colleague's question, we've had provincial elections and provincial medical health officers have continued to give in-person briefings because they think that's a better way to deliver the message about vaccination. Wouldn't it be better for Canadians to hear that message from Dr. New, Dr. Tam, instead of getting these essentially press releases?
The Public Health Agency of Canada makes its decisions about how to best communicate in various situations with Canadians, and they will continue to make sure that Canadians are getting the information they need to stay safe. And the top line for everything is, if you haven't yet gotten vaccinated, you need to. That's how we get through this pandemic. That's how we protect vulnerable Canadians who, for medical reasons, can't yet get vaccinated. That's how we protect our kids under 12 who can't get vaccinated yet either. That's how we get through. We need people to get vaccinated.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne. Votre gouvernement s'engage à financer le tunnel George Massey à Vancouver, qui a 6 voies d'autoroute. Je me demandais quelle est la différence avec le 3e lien de Québec.
On n'a pas pris de décision finale sur le tunnel George Massey. On n'a pas pris, évidemment, de décision sur le 3e lien. Par rapport au 3e lien, on est intéressé à regarder si on peut financer des éléments de transport collectif. J'ai toujours dit qu'en tant que gouvernement, nous sommes ouverts à toutes sortes d'investissements en infrastructure, mais on n'a rien à annoncer pour l'instant, ni pour l'un ni pour l'autre.
En suivi?
Okay. We have been a government there to invest in infrastructure across the country, particularly around public transit. We haven't made any final decisions on the Massey Tunnel or on the third link in Quebec City. We're continuing to work with partners and look at the projects. We will continue to make the kinds of historic investments in infrastructure we've had across the country, but we have not made any final decisions.
En suivi?
Respectueusement, c'est pas tout à fait ce que votre ministre Carla Qualtrough a semblé dire, mais on est en campagne électorale. Ne pensez-vous pas que les gens de Québec devraient savoir votre position sur le 3e lien, qui est un projet excessivement important dans la région?
On a investi énormément au Québec pour le transport collectif, que ce soit le tramway de Québec, que ce soit la ligne bleue, que ce soit le REM à Montréal. On va continuer d'être intéressé par des projets, particulièrement les éléments du 3e lien qui ont lien à du transport collectif. Ces discussions vont se continuer.
Next question.
Corinne Roman, CBC News. You often engage with people who show up to protest at your announcements, including those who don't believe in vaccinations. Yesterday evening, there were Indigenous women protesting old-growth logging and your efforts at reconciliation at the hotel where we were staying, and you avoided them. Why?
We continue to engage with all Canadians during this important election. This is a time of choice for people. People get to choose on how we're going to move forward as a country, both through this pandemic and how we build a better future for everyone. And a re-elected Liberal government will invest over $50 million in protecting old-growth forests, specifically in BC. And we'll continue to work to make sure we're protecting record amounts of our land and oceans, as we've committed to do for protecting biodiversity. 25% of our lands and oceans by 2025, 30% by 2030. That's a commitment that this government has made, and we're holding to. At the same time, we recognize there is a real issue here locally around old-growth forests and decisions made by the BC NDP government. It'd be interesting to ask Jagmeet Singh, a BC Member of Parliament and an NDP leader, what his perspective is on old-growth forests and the decisions that the Horgan government have made.
Following up.
Speaking of Jagmeet Singh, the NDP have been calling for going after the banks for quite some time in terms of their profits. And now today you're making this announcement. Why wait for an election to come up with this scheme?
I think people understand that an election is an important moment to make choices about how we move forward. We made a commitment in 2015 to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class, and the NDP voted against that when we actually move forward with it in government. We have been very, very clear that everyone must do their part to help get through this pandemic. Canadians, small businesses have sacrificed a tremendous amount over the past year and a half, even as banks have been doing very, very well with massive profits. We think they should be putting some of those profits towards helping Canadians own a home, helping Canada move forward and recover, and that's why we're going to ask them to contribute a bit more than they have been.
We'll take one last question.
Hi, this is Parmeet from Red FM. Good to see you again. Mr. Trudeau, my question is regarding the housing affordability, not in the BC but in the whole Canada. As we have seen, the property prices have been increasing tremendously in the last 2 years especially, whereas the income has not. So what are your plans to fill this gap anytime soon?
What we've been seeing over the past years in Canada is an increase in speculative growth. As people are increasingly flipping houses, as foreign buyers are coming into the market, as various predatory practices are getting more and more current around the country. We need to put a stop to that, and ours is the only plan that will do that. We're going to put forward a housing bill of rights to ensure that people are protected, that they have rights as they're making this incredibly difficult and important decision of buying a new home. I was speaking with Mike and Pam about how much of an issue it is, obviously, for everyone to buy a home, to think about changing homes, to think about your kids' opportunities for getting a home. And that's why we're going to bring in stricter rules to protect people from things like blind bidding and bidding wars that go on not just once or twice, but 10, 20 times for many families seeking to buy their first home. We need to make things fair. We need to put an end to speculative growth and get back to steady growth that both allows people to increase the equity in their homes and save for their retirement through their homes, but also allows people to save more and get into the housing market so that they can build a future for themselves. That's the plan we're putting forward for Canadians.
Following up.
Will there be any intervention from the government side to burst this real estate bubble?
I think we all know that the housing crisis that we are facing is multifaceted. People are facing many different challenges, and there are variations of challenges right across the country and from one family to the next. That's why there's no one simple solution, unlike what some other parties might say, but only a number of different approaches to both increase supply, to help people save, and to better protect people's rights. Those are the three things that this plan does. That's why we are confident that we're going to be able to continue to build on the success of our national housing strategy in getting hundreds of thousands of people into new homes to now help over 1 million people own their homes in the coming years.
Thank you. This is what ends today's press conference.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée tout le monde.